All right, guys, and welcome back to Real Talk Sports with Rico. Today, I'll be your host. Today's show, we are talking about week 15 of the National Football League. We're going to be recapping some of the top headlines of week 15 going into week 16. It is now crunch time in the NFL as we get ready to head into the playoffs. Before we jump into the content, let me first and foremost thank Anchor for being our platform, which is now Spotify Podcasts. I want to go ahead and thank the fans out there who have actually chimed in on a week-to-week basis to help us drive content to the show. Appreciate the comments and the follows, guys. Love it. And then also, too, I just want to thank once more the sponsors out there who have put sponsorship on the show. We so appreciate that. And without further ado, let's jump into the content, guys. I got some graphics for you, got some video for you, all courtesy of Madden 2024. Make sure you get your game on. And let's go ahead and start off with the first game of the evening, or the one that I first looked at today, and that is going to be the Kansas City Chiefs and, of course, your New England Patriots here. So shout out to Devontae, the real Hogan here. Listen, Kansas City came into Foxborough and Patrick Mahomes did what Patrick Mahomes does. Patrick Mahomes avoided a 3-game skid. It would have been, I think, the first time in his career, but he came in, got it done here. And surprisingly, when you look at the New England Patriots, as much noise as there is out there about the New England Patriots and how poorly that they've been at the quarterback position, really, New England has had one of the best defenses in the league since week 10. So they really played some stout defense. I know that the Kansas City Chiefs got this one 27-17, but I really wasn't convinced in this one. Even though Kansas City won this, even though Patrick Mahomes threw for 300 yards in this one, I still wasn't convinced. I'm really pleased with what New England was able to do, even though they fall to 3-10. It was a tough one. I mean, I think that you, as New England, you see a little bit with Bailey Zappi able to go down the field a little bit. He threw for 180 yards, did have a touchdown. Ezekiel Elliott came back to earth in this one, only 25 yards on the ground and 21 yards as far as receiving is concerned. And then Patrick Mahomes, I addressed it, 305 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 INTs, but no running game to speak of. I'm curious to see how they'll look once they get Isaiah Pacheco back in this one. Rashee Rice, a guy that we talked about coming out of college, coming into this system. This is a guy that Patrick Mahomes wanted. He's starting to look like a Patrick Mahomes kind of guy, being able to sit down in zones, especially when the play breaks down. And I think he was huge for them today. And this is something that they needed badly because Travis Kelce, only 5 receptions, 28 yards. I think Coach Belichick and that defense was really dialed in to shut down 87. And Rashee Rice stepped up, 9 receptions, 91 yards, and a touchdown for him. Clyde Edwards-Helaire got him a touchdown, as well as Jerick McKinnon. So Kansas City avoids a 3-game skid. They get a win that they so badly needed, and New England goes back to the drawing board once again in this one. Next up, let's take a look at the next game here that we had on the slate for today. And that is going to be the Chicago Bears and the Cleveland Browns in this one. So this was actually a pretty good football game. It came down to the wire. Actually, Joe Flacco, coming back and getting a game-winning field goal by Dustin Hopkins, which actually would seal the deal against the Chicago Bears, who had actually had a pretty good day throughout. I think that they performed admirably. I think that they did a great job as far as, moving the football. I think Justin Fields made some great decisions out there, but just couldn't close the deal. But I'm impressed with the way Chicago has played. And I think the one thing that you take away from this is that Justin Fields is your guy. I think if you're in Chicago, I think that the bottom line is you have got to go out there and you've got to find him some wide receivers. Because looking at this thing, DJ Moore, 52 yards, Tyler Scott, 49 yards. Cole Kmet, 5 receptions, 23 yards. Darnell Mooney, a guy who they've been super high on, only 14 yards. And so they have got to find some playmakers, I think, if you're Chicago, and I think that this team is a lot better off. On the flip side of this thing, Cleveland continues to win football games. Joe Cool continues to come in and do his thing. I think that Joe Flacco probably would still have been in the league had it not been for the fact that he ran into a tough situation where Baltimore drafted Lamar Jackson. They wanted to go a little bit more new school and go with a quarterback that's a little bit more mobile and kind of fits in today's game. And I think that's what happened to Joe Flacco at that time. And so, you're seeing that Joe Flacco can be a guy that if you're not asking him to use his legs, which I think this system fits the best for him, I just kind of think that situation in Baltimore kind of ran its course, especially once they start putting different pieces around him. It's more fitted for Lamar Jackson and his style of play, and that led to Joe Flacco's exit. So, I think Joe Flacco's found a solid running game behind him, whether it's Jerome Ford or Kareem Hunt being able to make plays there. You've got Amari Cooper, who's a nice play action wide receiver, meaning if you've got the running game going, you got the play action going. You look at David Njoku, who's one of the best tight ends in the game, and he runs a lot of those intermediate routes and things like that Joe Flacco can really execute on as a pocket passer. So Cleveland continues to get it done. I like the fact that it's ugly wins, but I like the fact that Cleveland has been able to stay in this thing despite the cloud of the Deshaun Watson. Is he hurt? Is he not hurt? Is he missing games? Is he not missing games? And by the way, I mean, if he's hurt, he's obviously out for the season. You saw the emotion that came with it. I know Cleveland's taken a lot of slack because they paid so much for him, but look, the game rolls on and they've still got to find ways to win. Cleveland's doing it. They're 9-5 right now. They're second in the AFC North. They're right there hanging in there. Maybe perhaps they can sneak up and win that division. Next up, you have an absolute a beatdown in my case, and that's going to be the Los Angeles Chargers and the Las Vegas Raiders. I thought that this was one of the worst football games ever that I've ever seen. 63-21, Vegas beating the Chargers, leading to Coach Staley getting fired. I think that this was something that was already going to come. I think it was something that is inevitable. And I think that when you look at the Chargers, they're right back in the situation that they were in when they had Coach Lynn, where they were terrible in situational football. They're wasting Justin Herbert and his prime years. The wide receivers that they've got, Quentin Johnson and these guys like that, have underperformed. I think that a lot of people thought that Quentin Johnson was going to have a bigger impact than what he's having now as a rookie. Joshua Palmer had a big day for the Chargers, had 113 yards on 4 receptions and a touchdown. But the story for him has been injuries, and he's usually been the go-to guy once wide receivers go down, whether it's Mike Williams or Keenan Allen. There was no Keenan Allen in this one. I think that this might have been one of the worst games that Austin Eckler has played. And really, this has been a tough season for Austin Eckler as well. So, I mean, Vegas just really, they beat the Chargers in all facets of football. And you could just tell that the Chargers going into this football game, they were really deflated. And I just don't think that mentally or physically, they really were into this game from the start. So next up, the next game to look at here in week 15 was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Green Bay Packers. I want to say that Baker Mayfield might be one of the top headlines in week 15. And I think that he might have won week 15, in my opinion, because the way that he was tossing out dimes out there, I mean, it was beautiful. It was a beautiful thing to watch. And so much was made about Chris Godwin not being involved in the offense. And he was involved in a huge, huge way today. 10 receptions, 155 yards. 15 yards per reception. He had a monstrous day, along with the fact that you pair that with Mike Evans, who has been a touchdown machine and is having a historical year. And what do the Bucs do that I have said week after week after week after week that they had to do? Run the football. Rashid White, 21 rushes, 89 yards. That's what I'm talking about. You got to pound that the rock. You've got to establish yourself at the line of scrimmage, and you've really got to show a level of nastiness and physicality before you start to go down the field. That is the kind of system that Baker Mayfield has really strived on in the NFL. And yes, I mean, I think so much is made of Baker Mayfield because he has that type of arm like a Jay Cutler, right? Like a Brett Favre. It's just harnessing that. And I think a lot of that in his pro career has been you've got to put pieces around him. When Coach Boyles has used his wide receivers, who I think are probably one of the best pair in the league, and you pair that with a running game, Baker Mayfield has looked terrific. I want to give them flowers because now they are at the top of their division. And quiet as is kept, Baker Mayfield, I think, is playing his way into a long-term contract with the Bucs because you don't have anywhere else to go. It's clear that you're not looking at Cal Trask. And I think that, honestly speaking, you might be best served continuing to keep that defense, which is stout and is a carryover from the Tom Brady years, going out, finding you a franchise running back to go with Baker Mayfield, along with a nice little slot, perhaps a tight end. I think if you retool the offensive pieces here in Tampa Bay, they still have something special. Green Bay, on the other hand, this is going to be tough for them. I mean, they're 6-8. They're still in the hunt, and they're trying to make the playoffs for the fourth time out of 5 years under Coach LaFleur. And I said last week that it's all about Jordan Love. Jordan Love is right there. Okay, like every time I say that, like it's like if he can just win this game in New York, if he can just win this game in Tampa Bay, if he can just cement himself and get this team into the playoffs, I think he totally starts to shed the shadow of Aaron Rodgers. And he also starts to get into that circle of, hey, Green Bay knows how to draft quarterbacks. And I think they have something with Jordan Love. He just hasn't been able to put it together. And I will say this. It has been tough behind him because much like Baker Mayfield, they need a running game. Aaron Jones has been injured throughout the year. He's been off and on. Also, too, with AJ Dillon, he's got a broken thumb. He's not really had a great year. I don't think he's eclipsed really 50 or 60 yards throughout. And so it's been tough getting the running game started. I think the receiving core is one that is young. It's getting better. It's super competitive, but I think they're still trying to find that it factor. Although I do like this kid, Jaden Reed. I think he's special. He reminds me a lot of what Deebo Samuel is. He actually reminds me a little bit of Deebo and Brandon Ayuk. So that's a name that I think you want to circle. Jaden Reed, I think, is really hungry. You see it in his eyes. 6 receptions, 52 yards, and a touchdown today. That is off a bad ankle. I like this kid moving forward. I mean, the Packers are still there, and I think Jordan Love is still trying to cement himself in the NFL, and I think it's just going to come down to a matter of him having to win the games he's supposed to win. Once he gets to that, then we can start to talk about Jordan Love being into that elite company. But until then, Green Bay is pretty stuck here at 6-8. Next up, we're looking at the New York Giants and the New Orleans Saints. Probably one of the worst football games out there. And once again, more ugly football for this weekend. This was an absolute beatdown, 24-6. The Giants probably should be ashamed of themselves in the sense that New Orleans has really struggled to score points. I mean, it has just been terrible for them to score points. They have no consistency. So for them, the Giants, that is, to give up 24 points and only score 6 against the Saints, that's pretty terrible. And I just think that when you look at the Giants as a whole, the one thing that I would say the Giants need to do is they have got to find some wide receiver help. They have got to find that Plexico Burress type of receiver. They've got to find that Victor Cruz receiver, that Odell Beckham receiver. When New York was winning and winning Super Bowls, they had names and receivers like that. They haven't had anybody that dynamic on the outside in quite some time. And I think from a quarterback standpoint, I'm still not sold on Jones, on Daniel Jones. And, with Tommy DeVito, he's shown that he can be serviceable. Do I think he's going to be a franchise quarterback in this league? Absolutely not, but it doesn't help the fact that Tommy DeVito had 4 rushes for 36 yards and Saquon Barkley, who's your all-world everything running back and player, had 14 yards and he only had 9 attempts. That just can't happen if you are on the sidelines coaching this football game up for the Giants. I mean, it was atrocious. And on the offensive end, Derek Carr, I've said it before, is not the answers for the Saints. But when you let this guy go for 3 touchdowns on you, 23 of 28, not a whole bunch of misses. Alvin Kamara only 66 yards, and they're able to find it. And they didn't even have their wide receiver one out there. Yeah, I mean that's really really troublesome, and that's a tough loss I think for the Giants. And like I said, the Giants really need to start looking forward to the offseason. They have got to find some wide receiver help. Next up, the next game to take a look at was the Atlanta Falcons and the Carolina Panthers. I would say it was an upset. I thought that Atlanta was going to win this football game. I did go with their defense from a fantasy football standpoint. I thought that they were going to have a lot better situation, but they give up a late field goal to Carolina to win the game with like 2 seconds left. And this is why when you look at the standings and you look at teams that are like on the hunt or, hey, there's a chance that they can get to the playoffs and things like that, you can't get fooled. Atlanta is a team that, yes, because of their division, they're right there, but let's be honest, they are not going to make the playoffs because these are teams that you have to beat. These are games that you have to win. And there's too many times that Atlanta has been in situations where they are not winning the football games that you need to win. And to be a playoff team in a National Football League, you have to do so. Look, they're 6-8. They're third in the NFC South. By no means are they out of it, but this is a game that you have to look at, and you have got to figure out a way to win this game. I think a lot of the problems with Atlanta starts with their quarterback play. Desmond Ridder is basically Marcus Mariota 2.0, and I think that when they drafted him out of Cincinnati, he had a lot of hype. He was the guy that you were thinking was going to be a franchise quarterback. I'm not seeing it. 12 of 20, 152. He had a touchdown, an INT, a 79.6 rating today. Questionable here. You had Kyle Pitts had another lackluster day. Drake London has a big day, then he has a bad day. And these are guys that you're depending on. Drake London, a guy that you got out of USC, was making a whole bunch of plays out there at USC, hasn't really found that consistency in the NFL. Then you look at Kyle Pitts here, a guy that came on very strongly at the tight end position, hasn't really been the same since he's had the surgery on the legs and stuff like that. So that's a concern. You have one of the most accurate kickers in NFL history. You didn't even get him in a chance to really get some range and kind of knock down some field goals today. So, yeah, I mean, it's questionable because Atlanta has to figure out a way to move the football consistently. And the fact that Bijan Robinson started off so well, and now you're looking at statistics where he's getting outgained by Tyler Aguilar, who I knew was good. We knew he was good last year, but Bijan Robinson was a guy that you thought was, and in my opinion, when I looked at him on the game tape and I've looked at him in the NFL thus far, he reminds me of a modern day Marshall Faulk is what he is because he can catch it. He can run it. He's a great pass blocker. And it's just like, I feel like they're underutilizing him in Atlanta. So I don't know what they have to do, but Atlanta to me has some better pieces than what they've shown. On the other side of this, you look at Bryce Young, he had a solid day because he had no turnovers. He was 18 of 24, which is a pretty good percentage pattern, 93.6 as far as his quarterback rating. But the one thing that Carolina did was they ran the football. They ran the football today. You had Hubbard had 22 rushes for 87 yards. So they played some good ball control offense here. And they had manageable third downs and really kept Bryce Young in a situation where he didn't have to do too much. And I think that that's the one thing that Bryce Young has had to do is then there's been so much pressure on him to win games and to win it with his arm. When you look at his statistics in Alabama and you look at the way he played, he had a lot of playmakers around him. So I think that there has to be a bit of patience. I know C.J. Stroud is balling. I know Will Levis is starting to ball, but you have got to be patient here with Carolina because let's be honest, the cupboard is very empty as far as playmakers, and they're in the same situation, in my opinion, as the Chicago Bears. You've got to go out there and you got to find some guys that can play around Bryce Young in order for him to be successful. The next game is the Tennessee Titans, and you had the Houston Texans. No C.J. Stroud today, was out of the game due to an injury from last week, but Case Keenum coming in, serviceable backup, has played exceptional in roles that he's been in, whether it's Minnesota. He had some time with the Rams, and now he's a guy that's coming out of Houston as far as growing up there. He came back, had a horrible interception to start off. I'm not going to lie. I was a little worried about it, but was able to get the game-winning drive, get the Texans in position to kick a game-winning field goal into this one. This did go into overtime, so this was a game where, again, I think you're looking at this, both sides should actually be impressed. Okay, Will Levis, I know he only had 199 yards and he did have an INT, but I think Tennessee has probably found their quarterback for the most part. It scares me that you didn't really get a whole bunch with Derrick Henry. This is probably the most inconsistent that I've seen Derrick Henry in his career. Starting to wonder, should the Titans have maybe traded him at the trade deadline, because you're wanting to know, you don't know how much, tires are really left on the tread there, because he's got a lot of miles on his body. And, he's just to a point now where I'm not sure he's going to be able to just run through people like he's done before. So that's something that I think the Titans are going to have to address, along with what are they going to do as far as playmakers are concerned. Traylon Burks, if you remembered, he was drafted in replacement of A.J. Brown, and he was supposed to be a younger A.J. Brown. He has been vastly inconsistent out there. And, DeAndre Hopkins, he's a bit older. He's been in the league for quite some time. He's shown that he can do some things, but I'm not sure he can do some things like he used to do in Houston at this rate. So, I just think that they're a rebuilding football team, but I do like the fact that they've gone out and they've found an elite quarterback. On the other side of this thing, I love what Coach Ryan has been able to do with the Texans. He has instilled a winning mentality with the Texans, something they have not had probably since Bill O'Brien was there with the Texans, and the last time they really made a serious playoff push. And so, look, they're getting great efforts from Devin Singletary. I think that this is probably his best year as a professional. 26 rushes, 121 yards. He has really made Dameon Pierce, who is, I think, was an all-rookie on the all-rookie team last year, and like an all-pro guy last year, has been irrelevant this year. How about Noah Brown from the Cowboys making another sighting? I know he's been out due to a knee injury the last couple of weeks and concussions and everything else, but 8 receptions, 82 yards and a touchdown there. Dalton Schultz still getting it done. And he had 58 yards on 4 catches too. So finding ways to win. This is what I'm talking about with Atlanta, and I'm talking about the difference between Atlanta and Houston. Houston finds ways to win games that they should win, okay? Atlanta found a way to lose a game that they should win. That's the difference. And that's why I'm like, even though Houston is third in the AFC South, it wouldn't surprise me once they get CJ Stroud back that this team is able to find a way to get into the playoffs, because they've been able to get past some games where essentially they should win them, and it's tough situations. And because they've been able to overcome those situations, those are teams that I'm scared of in the playoffs. Next up, more bad football on Saturday. You had the Denver Broncos and you had the Detroit Lions. Kudos to the Detroit Lions for going ahead and taking care of business in this one, 42-17. Much more of the bad Denver Broncos in this one. They had been hot. Russell Wilson didn't turn the ball over, but he wasn't very special out there. 18 of 32, 223, did have a touchdown. Javonte Williams was on a milk carton, man. He went missing out there. He only had 12 rushes for 27 yards. So they really didn't have a running game to speak of. Jerry Jeudy had a pretty productive day, 3 receptions, 74 yards, and Cortland Sutton, 5 receptions for 71 yards. And so when I look at Denver and I look at Sean Payton has always had an electric offense, and dating back to what Drew Brees has been able to do with the Saints. I think that the issue that you're going to see now with Denver is that Denver, I think that they need to probably move on from Russell Wilson. And I think Russell Wilson would be better served going off into maybe more of a passing attack game suited for him, like maybe Las Vegas. Like I'm going to say Las Vegas would be perfect for Russell Wilson, because they need a quarterback, and Devontae Adams is there. You still have a pretty good running back in Josh Jacobs that you should get back. And I just think that when you see Sean Payton screaming at Russell Wilson, it's something about those two. The chemistry's not there, and I'm not sure if it's going to be there. Even though they've turned it around, I just don't know if I think Sean Payton is still rebuilding this football team. And I think there's so many pieces that have to move. And I think Russell Wilson is one of those guys that is going to have to move, or he should move for the better of the two to be successful. With Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton, I just think at some point you're going to have to go out and find some more people to play on the outside. It's just been too inconsistent with both of those players, and they've been the 1-2 alphas on that team for quite some time, and they have not had a lot of downfield play. So I just think that Denver is in a situation where they have got to revamp still that offense. The defense is solid. Offense needs to pick it up. Jared Goff, 24 of 34, 5 touchdowns, a career high for him, 134.6 rating. And how about Jamar Gibbs? Keeping that line of Alabama running backs going, 11 rushes, 100 yards, and a touchdown today. And David Montgomery, 17 rushes, 85 yards too as well. So look, this is one of the best running games that I think Detroit has had in quite some time. And I'm probably going to have to go back to when they had Barry Sanders out there. Like, they haven't had a running attack like this since then. And so I think you pair that with the fact that you do have a franchise quarterback in Jared Goff. I think that all the naysayers out there who were questioning whether you trade Matthew Stafford, you see that it's worked out for both teams. I think that Jared Goff has some years left in him. And I love the fact that they found this guy, Sam Laporta. I mean, he has been terrific from a tight end position. He has got to be tight end one for the last couple weeks. Once again, 3 touchdowns, 5 receptions, 56 yards. This guy should be Sam the end zone, because he continues to find the end zone out there. So you pair that with the fact that now Jared Goff has some terrific wide receivers. I think it's time that Detroit, if they can win games that they're supposed to win, now you're starting to see the team that I think that Jared Goff had left with Sean McVay and having all those options. This is a very scary football team, because defensively, this team can lock you down. I love Hutchinson out there. He reminds me a lot of J.J. Watts, T.J. Watt, Bosa kind of player. Like, these guys come after the quarterback, and they don't have to put 5 and 6 out there in the box. They can get you with the straight 4 up front. So I love that about Detroit, and the fact that they can win several different games. I was a little on their case because they didn't win football games that they were supposed to win. But right now, they're 10-4. They're first in the NFC North, getting it done. And that's what you're supposed to do against a team that you should win against. You beat them, and you beat them convincingly. Next up, you have the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Indianapolis Colts. I think that this was a terrible performance for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And in having been in that city and knowing that fan base, you've got to be disappointed as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, because offensively, this is the worst offense that I have ever seen in Pittsburgh Steelers history ever since I have watched football. And the fact that they have no wide receiver one, it's shocking. I mean, they have a wide receiver one in George Pickens, but they cannot get him the ball. It's mind-boggling. Like, you have a good receiver and you can't get him the ball. You know that the offensive line needs work. Why have you not made adjustments? I've not seen this under Coach Tomlin's tenure. The defense is still stellar, but it doesn't matter if you continue to have to be on the field moment after moment, second after second, because teams are killing you on the time of possession. This was tough for Pittsburgh. This was a tough football game to watch. It's not a bunch of, happy moments here for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They just have to revamp. And I can understand where Coach Tomlin is coming from, where he says big changes have to come, and big changes absolutely have to come. On the other side of this ball, Gardner Minshew showing a sample size of what he could do when he was with the Jags, but shows you more of what he could do with the Colts. He's having a great year, 123.4 rating, 18 of 28. How about Trey Sermon, a guy the 49ers drafted? Philly had him, 17 rushes, 88 yards. He had a good one. You had Tyler Goodson, 11 rushes, 69 yards. Zach Moss went out with an arm injury. Michael Pittman, a horrific hit, concussion, knocked him out of the game. DJ Montgomery, 2 receptions for 48 yards. Here's a guy that was playing in another league and then comes in and gets a touchdown. So, look, Gardner Minshew's been able to find multiple people. He's opened up the down the field action for the Colts, which is something that they've had an issue with. Remember, dating back to Matt Ryan, also Phillip Rivers, they were looking and searching for that answer, trying to find somebody since Andrew Luck. And they have something with Gardner Minshew. You think you have something with Anthony Richardson. And, I know Anthony Richardson is dynamic with the legs, and he did show some arm strength and stuff like that. But I will say this. Anthony Richardson had better show that he can kind of go down the field like this. He can kind of pick a defense apart, and he's going to have to do something other than with his legs. Otherwise, I think that Indianapolis might have found their starting quarterback. That's all I'm saying going into the next year's training camp. Now, at this point, it's still a long season to go, but the Colts are 8-6. They've come back from that dismal year that they had last year, and they're looking pretty strong right now behind Gardner Minshew. So kudos to him, kudos to the Colts and their rookie head coach getting it done out there in Indianapolis. Next up, one of the most exciting games of Saturday, and that was the Minnesota Vikings and the Cincinnati Bengals. How about the quarterback for the Bengals getting his revenge because he was cut, in fact, by Minnesota? So to come back in this football game, get a late field goal in OT to win 27-24 and actually hurt his former team. Minnesota is now 7-7, second in the NFC North. You have Cincinnati hanging in there at 8-6, they're third. But it was an epic performance from Jake Boeing to come down, get the game-winning field goal, 29-42. Not a whole bunch from Joe Mixon, 10 rushes for 47 yards in this one. But I think if you're a Bengals fan, the one thing that's concerning here is that Jamar Chase went out with a separated shoulder. This is the same type of AC joint that knocked Anthony Richardson out for the year, the quarterback for the Colts. At this point, you're third in the AFC. I'm not saying that you pack it in, but I don't know if you want to trot Jamar Chase out there with a bad shoulder. Okay, he's going to be hit pretty much every play because you're either in a hand battle with the cornerbacks. You're going to have to land on that shoulder when you get the catch. You're going to be tackled. That shoulder could be leading in to try to get extra yards. And so this has been an injury-riddled Cincinnati team, but I can say that they are winning football games, but I think that they have to make a serious decision in what they're going to do with their franchise wide receiver in Jamar Chase. I'm voting that you keep him out and that you go with T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd and you try to salvage the season that way. I don't know if I put Jamar Chase back out there. On the other side of this thing, Nick Mullins comes in 26 of 33, 303 yards, 2 touchdowns, but 2 INTs. But how about Ty Chandler, 23 rushes, 132 yards, and a touchdown? Welcome to the party. You knew he was going to play because there was going to be no Matson, but man, he played well. Jordan Addison out of USC, 6 receptions, 111 yards to go along with Justin Jefferson, 7 receptions for 84 yards, starting to find his stride now, coming back from the hamstring, concussions, and everything else. So good for Justin Jefferson, but tough one here for Minnesota. They are still in the playoff hunt, but these are winnable games that you have got to win, and this is what I'm talking about when it comes to making the playoffs. You have to win those games. Some of the late games that are going on right now, if you are looking at this, in fact, you have San Francisco winning 42-22 in Arizona, all San Francisco. Kyler Murray has thrown an interception in this one, and he's really struggling against, guess what, one of the best defenses, if not the best defense in all the NFL with the San Francisco 49ers in this one. So all San Francisco here, Brock Purdy doing his thing. Debo Samuels has been in the end zone. A whole bunch of stuff there. Then we got the Dallas Cowboys and the Buffalo Bills. And just when you think you want to say, how about them Cowboys? They go out there and they lay down a dud. It's 31-3 right now in the fourth quarter, 10:37 on the clock here. Buffalo all over Dallas. And to be honest with you, going into this game, I thought that Buffalo was going to win the game. I didn't think that they would be up on Dallas like this. There was reports that Dallas had a couple players that have been ill, and Stephen Gilmore was one of those guys, or Stephon Gilmore was one of those guys. I think that Micah Parsons was one of those guys last week. They were able to get out of that. And it's just the fact that Buffalo knows that this is winning time. And this is what football teams that have to win games do. They go out there and win the games that they have got to win. Okay, so there's games that you should win, and there's games that you have to win. Buffalo has to win out in order to make this thing work. They know that. And so they put the foot down, and they came out in this one. And the one thing that I noticed about this one and watching this football game is that Buffalo is playing with nastiness. Okay, that's always been the issue with Buffalo, is that they can finesse you, but in the 5-6 year window that they've had with Josh Allen, they don't run the football. They don't run when they have to run, and or when they want to run, and they can't run the football when they need to run it. Today, James Cook, listen to this, 25 rushes, 179 yards, and a touchdown. And Latavius Murray has a touchdown. If you go back and look at that first quarter touchdown, that's the nastiness that Buffalo has to play with. When you're talking about carrying 4-5 guys and pushing the pile to the end zone after initially being stopped, if Buffalo can play with that type of physicality in the offense, then that's going to open it up for Stephon Diggs. That's going to open it up for Gabe Davis. But because the fact that don't put any fear in your heart up front running the football, you can sit back in coverage and play Stephon Diggs, or you can play Gabe Davis. You can play on top of Knox. They don't even use their running backs as wide receivers. And today, James Cook, he got a touchdown as a wide receiver. This is what I'm talking about with Buffalo. You have got to just basically stop being one-dimensional. They're a one-dimensional football team. If they want to take it to the next level, you've got to be able to do a couple different things. And so I think, and I'm hoping that Buffalo is able to take this game and really turn the corner, because even if there's illnesses in Dallas, they're still playing against an elite defense, and you're still playing against an elite offense. Going into this game, both Buffalo and Dallas are the first and second best as far as converting on third down. So that's why I'm shocked that you're only getting 3 points out of Dallas. And it is light rain out there in Buffalo. The winds, I think when I was looking at this thing, it's 13 to 15 miles per hour or something like that. So it's supposed to be a little windy, but still, I think that Dallas had enough here in the tank to make some plays. CeeDee Lamb only 38 yards. Tony Pollard, who struggled as a starting running back, only 36 yards in this one. Dak, 13 of 24, 82 yards and an INT. So surprisingly, they have not been able to figure out Buffalo's defenses. It looks like they are really on route here to take a loss in the NFC, but they're still very much alive as far as the NFC East is concerned. Next up, you have Baltimore versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. This game is going to take place here at about 5:20 West Coast time. It's going to be 8:20 out east. And so you have Baltimore coming into Jacksonville, who played absolutely terrible last week against the Cleveland Browns. And I just think that when you look at the totality of this one, this is a game where Baltimore, yes, they are a top seed, but I don't really believe they're a top seed. Like, I think that Baltimore they disappoint me, okay? Because you have an elite quarterback with Lamar Jackson. You have Odell Beckham over here. You got your guy in Zay Flowers, who a lot of people including Steve Smith Jr., I think or senior, excuse me, was saying that he's probably one of the best route runners in the draft. And I got a chance to see what he was able to do against the Rams last week. And they're not going down the football field enough. I mean, they're still reliant heavily on the running game. And I just got done talking about Buffalo and one dimensional. Physically, and as far as the physicality, Baltimore has that. The problem with Baltimore has always been they do not go down the football field enough. I don't understand that. And with the fact that Lamar Jackson is so dynamic, he creates pockets, even when there's not a pocket, and he has the arm strength. He can make every throw. So I don't want to hear that nonsense because he can. He has an arm for sure. I don't understand why they are not getting the football down the field. And I think this is a team that scares me because they're one dimensional. And I feel like when you get into the playoffs and then you start to really take the air out of the football, okay, now you're going to have to do a couple things well. You can't just do one or the other. You're going to have to run the football if you're not comfortable running it. You're going to have to pass the football if you're not comfortable doing it. If you're mainly just comfortable running the football, teams are going to key in on that. They're going to go ahead and sit on that. And then they're basically going to make you throw over the top and beat them that way. Until Baltimore beats me in these one-on-one coverages and things like that, they're still going to see a lot of stuff where people are going to be hovering up on the line of scrimmage. They're going to be ready and anxious to tackle Gus Edwards and their running backs and things like that. They're going to try to put a spy in the box to take away Lamar Jackson. And then now you're saying, okay, there's no Mark Andrews. We haven't had a proven wide receiver. What are we going to do now? And so that's the one thing with Baltimore. I actually like Jacksonville to win this game. I think that Jacksonville puts aside that terrible performance that they had against Cleveland. I think that Trevor Lawrence, now that he's had another week to get better off the ankle, I think he's going to go down the field a little bit more. I know he's 17-10 as far as touchdowns to INT ratios. I think Calvin Ridley steps up in this one. He's got 58 receptions or 55 receptions, and he's averaging 13.5. And he's only had 5 touchdowns. I think he's going to have a little bit more, but I think that what the Jacksonville Jaguars were factoring in was that they were going to have a healthy Zay Jones. They were going to have a healthy wide receiving core, and they really haven't had that. And I think that that's really been the issue for Trevor Lawrence and the Jacksonville Jaguars, is that they haven't been able to pass the ball like they did last year. Now, going into this, I will say that Jacksonville is very vulnerable to the run. They've given up a lot more in the run game than they really should have traditionally. Now, with that being said, I think that they figure out a way to slow down Baltimore enough, and they take a little bit of the game tape that was taken from the Rams and Baltimore last week. I think they find a way to get it done against Baltimore. And I think if it comes down to a last drive, I want to say that this one is probably going to be a 33-30 game. I think that you're going to see Trevor Lawrence and these guys pull it out, go to 9-5, and then knock Baltimore down to 10-4. Next up, guys, we have the Monday Night Football game, and that is going to be the Seattle Seahawks versus the Philadelphia Eagles. And this is a tough game. I went with Philadelphia last week, and they got handled by the Cowboys. They're going and traveling over to Seattle. It's an over-under of 45 points. It is going to be windy out there. It's going to be raining. And on top of that, Jalen Hurts didn't practice on Friday. He has been downgraded to questionable. Okay. And so if you're playing fantasy football like I am, I went out and I got Marcus Mariota because there's a real chance that Jalen Hurts may not be able to play football Monday night. Now they're hoping another day of rest will help. It doesn't bode well that the illness reportedly got worse overnight. He had to travel separate from the team. So there is a big question mark here with Philadelphia. Now, Philadelphia without Jalen Hurts is a vulnerable football team. I think that Seattle can find a way to win this. They're going to run the football. They're going to be physical. I think, Zach Charbonnet and those guys are going to find a way to go at that front of Philadelphia, which has been a bit vulnerable, even though it's really good. Kenneth Walker, those guys are going to go at them. Cornerback play, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, those guys are going to go after the corners a bit. Now, the question for Seattle is Geno Smith going to play, or is it going to be Drew Lock? Now, clearly, I think that when you're looking at Seattle plays a lot better when they have Geno Smith out there. Okay, he's going into this thing. He's questionable. He missed last week with that groin. And I think this is a situation where if Geno Smith plays, I think that Seattle wins this game. If Jalen Hurts doesn't play, and this is a big if he doesn't play, I'm saying that, yeah, I think Seattle can win this football game. And so I think minus Jalen Hurts, if you're saying minus Jalen Hurts, I like this one to be a 20-10 game. I don't think that Marcus Mariota is going to be able to make enough plays out there. So I think a 20-10 game in favor of Seattle. Seattle badly needs this football game. So I think that they're able to get the win against a very vulnerable Philadelphia Eagles team. And so with that being said, guys, that is today's podcast here. So I just want to go ahead and thank you guys out there for watching Real Talk Sports with Rico. You can actually go ahead and you can find us here on YouTube. If you go ahead and look down in the show notes, you'll see the links for that. You can also follow the podcast on Spotify as well. That link is going to be in the show notes as well. I want to go ahead and thank the fans out there who have actually chimed in on a week-to-week basis here to help us drive content to the show. And I just want to go ahead and thank the sponsors out there for putting sponsorship on the show. So for myself, this is Rico. This is Real Talk Sports, guys. Appreciate it. I will see you guys on the next show. I'm out. Take care, guys. Peace.